Have you been watching videos of Nolvus and wondered why your game doesn't look like this? I think it's time that I showed you what mods I added, settings I changed, and how to crank your FPS into the hundreds. On top of that, I'll be showing you even more features of Nolvus that might change how you play, along with some fun playstyles, suggestions, and MCM setups. The channel hit a huge milestone recently, with over 1 million views on the Nolvus Part 1 video. It's brought so many new players to the community I'm so happy to be part of. I had an idea on what I could do to give back to the Skyrim modding community and celebrate this milestone for the channel the best way I know how. I am going to have to keep you guessing for a while on that one though, as there's lots to cover for part 3 of my deep dive review of the Modlist Nolvus Ascension. So join me in Skyrim once again as we learn how to serenade your enemies to a traumatic death, traverse the landscapes with ease thanks to magic assisted jumping, should you have fantasy mode enabled, or even soar through the sky as a winged terror of the night, become a master of alteration magic and use telekinesis like a Jedi, wield necrotic and blood magic as a death knight, or staggering your foes into oblivion and back as a stagger stacking redguard. There's so many builds that I have no idea how we'll fit all of this into one video, from non-lethal thieves kicking bears in the face, Pyromancer Ronins, and even Dwemer Artificers with dwarven gadgets. There's plenty more under the hood of one of Skyrim's most popular mod lists, and I'm here to show you why it's time to return to the lands of Tamriel once again. Let's start off with how to boost your game's performance with the help of FSR or DLSS. This sadly is a paywalled mod from Pure Dark's Patreon, but because it offers such fantastic results, I simply had to showcase it in action. Walking through Riverwood above 100 FPS and Whiterun stables with low dips to 80 but on average around 90 plus, it's safe to say that I think this is well worth it, as without this I'd be struggling to hit 60 FPS here in Nolvus running on a 3090 with a Ryzen 5 800X 3D and 64GB of RAM to play with. So here's a quick guide on how to add it via Mod Organizer 2. First you'll need to download 2 files from Pure Dark's Skyrim Discord channel. This becomes available once you're a Patreon member. Use the search filter and type upscale, and locate the base upscaler mods included with Nolvus. Add Pure Dark's mod with the Downloads tab in Mod Organizer 2 and install. Place it next to the other upscalers, activate the newly installed mod, and deactivate the 2 other upscaler mods. Now for the other file you downloaded for reshade, as Nolvus has this included, you just need to replace the DLL file with the one currently in the Nolvus stock game folder. Once in game, hit the end key and you should have the DLSS/FSR menu open up, and you may need to authenticate as it has DMR protection. It's not everyone's bag, but the results speak for itself. I'm walking around Whiterun at 110 FPS. Now on to some hair mods that I've added. Once again, these are paid Patreon mods from Dint. It's been one of the most frequently asked questions on my Nolvus Part 2 video. Where did you get that hair? Well, the link is in the description as it is in the other video, although I just didn't make a big deal out of it then. I had no idea people were this crazy about hair, but yeah, he has a main collection and some Redguard hairs that I would recommend as showcased here.
Heard any rumours lately?
Next we have DBVO, which gives the player character a voice. Now voice packs have to be downloaded and patched individually, so it can be a little intimidating to find all the patches that you need. If you're unsure, I highly recommend that you use the search feature in MO2 to find out which mods are included in Nolvus. Now for a feature that's already included in Nolvus, it just doesn't have a keybind set by default. A closer look lets you bind a key to zoom in and out of the camera to take, well, a closer look. I think a lot of people thought that I added a conversation mod, when in actual fact I was just zooming in with this mod. Now for some UI essentials, I add these to any mod list that I play. Starting with Skyrim Souls, which unpauses the menu, this pairs really nicely with the Show Players in Menu mod. For the main UI overhaul, I ditched Nordic UI for Untarnished because it better supports my ultra-wide and in general looks a lot cleaner for me. Totally not essential, but I do adore these animated icons by El Sopa, they just make me happy. I was on the fence about showing my true HUD settings because, well, it's just really boring for those who don't care, but for those who do, you might want to see it. So I'm going to go through this real quickly. I'm not going to really narrate all my thought process, it's just catered towards my ultra-wide really, so the values might vary depending on your resolution. So don't just copy me, it might not work. There is a cool feature with the colours in True HUD, as you can use hex codes to change the health bars and magic and stamina and all that jazz. Just Google hex codes, find a colour picker, and away you go. The enemy health bars are scaled down a little, the player UI is much cleaner, and it's less intrusive since I muted eye equip. I've decided I'm sticking with the Wheeler mod that I showed in part 2. The mod is called Wheeler Quick Action Wheel of Skyrim, and just like in part 2, it's in the description. So as a thank you to the community for 1 million views, I went hunting on Fiverr for some 3D artists to make a sword that I could give back to the community. 2 artists submitted swords, and, well, I'll show you what I settled on later. First up though is this katana with my Oni logo on it, and a pommel that also had an Oni on it. You can really tell that these 3D artists aren't overly familiar with Skyrim modding, as the renders that they sent as examples didn't really look anything like this and were much higher quality. Shout out to Guild who helped me port what was usable into the game however. Overall though, this one is a hard pass for me, it's just not to the quality that I want. The second sword had a lot more potential, much more my cup of tea in terms of design. The original render images looked solid, until we actually ported it in game. The Relentless signature was a nice touch, I have to say, and the guard, pommel and handle were a decent shape. I think we were onto something. I actually really like the guard. It's a shame that all the detail was muted with how low quality the textures are in game. We really struggled to make this actually look metallic at all, and the sheath doesn't really match up with the metallic of the sword. Safe to say that I still wasn't satisfied, but I paid the artists and we went back to the drawing board. And it's at that point I had an idea to call in a favour. There was only one man, one legend that I felt could deliver to you relentless bastards the quality you deserve. This is our sword. My thank you to the community, to Nolvus and Vector. This is Relentless. Complete with the sheath, the Elder Nordic runes upon the blade read Relentless. The sheath is also embossed with runes reading Zen. Sole nod to the channel without being blatantly obvious. The guard's been adapted from the previous sword, and we even have variants with magical energy rippling through the runes. The blade is reactive to light when shined on directly, and has visible signs of wear and tear, which just adds to that quality. The rune's rippling effect took quite a bit of time in testing to get right, and has 3 different levels of glow intensity with the FOMod installer, along with 2K and 4K textures. I am quite curious to find out if any of you have actually guessed who made this sword before the big reveal at the end here, as he's kind of a big deal. I did ask for a personal variant to be made with black leather and holy glow, because I do tend to play with restoration magic a ton, and it just suits my Waylander character dressed in black. For those who support the channel, you'll be able to find a way of obtaining this variant, but I'm not going to be publicly advertising this at all, as it's not really the main focus here, or the main sword's design. Let me know which variant that you like the look of the most, and if this video does well, you might see some more collaborations in the future. Anyways though, I think it's time that we reveal who made this awesome sword for the community. Up next, I thought we'd discuss how to approach playing a bard in Nolvus. I've opted for a pure illusion-focused bard that travels from tavern to tavern in search of fame and fortune, while also being unusually capable in combat when required. It's a bit of a meme build if I'm honest with you, but I had so much fun with it that I thought it would be cool to show you how versatile Nolvus can be, especially when making unique and interesting characters such as this. So I set myself a challenge, not to be able to directly deal damage, with the exception of hand to hand, as I think a bard would probably have gotten into a bar fight at least once or twice. So with the focus of speechcraft and illusion, let's discuss the mechanics here. First up, in the speechcraft perk tree, you'll need to pick up Performer, so that you can start making some gold in taverns. Its follow-up perk also allows you to use it more often. You can even get better rewards from the opposite sex with Serenade. My recommendation is to save up some gold and get illusion spell cost enchant gear as quick as possible. Now to start an engagement, we're going to use Shadow Legion to generate some illusions to start attacking stuff. It's here where things get interesting. If enemies are distracted enough, we can cast Death March, which makes enemies lose health rapidly when not moving, and they won't be moving because they're too busy dancing thanks to Irresistible Dance, which we'll be performing on a flute here. Enemies are just unlocked in one place as the illusions close in for the kill. Sadly, Death March can't kill on its own, that's why we do need the illusions. I also like the idea that the illusions the bard would use in storytelling, in taverns and stuff. You can also sentence someone to death just by using mind control effects and then interacting with them as the Reaper comes to claim another victim. We can get even more illusions by using Evil Twin. They're weaker and take more damage, but will just keep on spawning to attack anything that it's replicating. The downside with this is that it's a channeled spell, but I'd only use it once you have other illusions active. Possession marked a target, and instead of dying when zeroing their health, they begin to fight for the player with 40% increased damage. I would spam this on enemies while your illusions fight them to gain even more allies. The Ritual Stone will spawn illusions of slain enemies at the start of combat, which pairs extremely nicely with Spectral Warband. This manifests illusions of allies, which in turn feeds even more slain enemies for the ritual. Once you get things going, you'll have a small army to tackle fights with. Mind-controlled enemies can also take damage with a spell called Mindfire, which deals damage over time to any enemies affected by mind-controlling effects, such as Calm, Frenzy or Fear. While the damage isn't great, it's something to use as filler as your illusions hoard your enemies to death. Lastly, you can use Spirit Guardian to manifest a Spirit Companion, which you can actually give gear to, effectively making a tank DPS for your warband of illusions. Once again, this build is just a bit of fun, bit of a meme, just to show how wide the variety can be with Nolvus. Maybe it'll spark some creativity in you. Let me know if you create something equally as wacky. What about acquiring items, spells and other oddities the non-legit way? Well, I think it's time that we showed off another feature included into the mod pack.
Krogar doesn't have to know if we sit together, or drink together. I doubt he would even care.
You tempt me mightily, Alpha, but I wouldn't cuckold another man.
For those tempted to cheat their way to fortune, simply open your inventory and move over to the miscellaneous tab to access the add item pack. This gives you both a power and an item that you can click on to open access to the entire game's item listings, including all the mods too. I use this for build testing a lot of the modded spell packs, quite a lot actually. It will sap some of the fun out of discovering things for yourself however, so do use this with some moderation in mind, or it'll kill the vibe for you. Next I want to talk about SmoothCam presets, as the default modern preset of Nolvus, in my opinion, always looks really jittery, and I just prefer a closer cam in general. Well, the Modlist comes with a few presets, so you can change from like the Souls-like preset to the Valhalla, but the default is the modern preset. I've also added the Hellblade Senua preset, and since then have moved over to my own custom version. You can access and change these through the MCM. Here's me switching to the Valhalla preset, which has much more higher FOV and the player character is further away. I would recommend this over the modern preset if you don't want to add other presets yourself to the list. If you want a close and cinematic one, maybe try the Hellblade or the Senua variant of that as well. The camera for this preset is a lot closer, but it has got some issues of it being centered, which can block your view a lot, so I ended up making my own preset, which I've been constantly making tweaks for to try and get it where it needs to be, which is kind of left aligned. I don't really have any plans to release this to the public, but if you guys hit that like button and let me know in the comments, I might just release it. We'll see. Next, a feature I don't think many are using, which I do highly recommend. This hotkey system allows you to make equip sets, meaning one button to equip something in your right, left hand, and a power or shout as well. This can be accessed by the MCM, and you can use the search filter to type hotkey to bring up the hotkey system. From here we can click into the managing tab and create a new equip set. Name it whatever you like. For this example I'm going to go with sword and heal and apply a hotkey 1 with a condition of holding down shift. So whenever I press shift 1, the sword and heal will equip. On the right under weapons, I'll select my heal spell in the left hand and the sword in the right. Shouts also include powers, but for this example I'll leave it blank. I'm going to add the toggle equip unequip feature here and then save the equip set once I've checked everything is how I like it. Onto some new magic focus builds. First up we have the Death Knight. For this one I'll be using the Desecration spell pack and Hemomancy from the Vampire Overhaul Sacrosanct to dominate engagements with an army of ghostly horrors and punishing blood magic while looking pretty damn cool with a Dark Knight heavy padded armor set from community member Gildy Boy. The thing I love the most about this build is these necrotic flame monarchs, which hurl flames towards enemies, and once they're tagged by this, when the victims die, they turn into these wraith-like draugrs to fight alongside us. There's no limit to how many of these can be spawned in at once, although they do disappear after a short period of time. It's really satisfying seeing these monarchs hurling flames like suppressing fire as you prepare your next move. We leveled up our Vampire custom skill tree to obtain Corpse Curse, which is an AoE paralyze spell that can be cast in one hand, which gives free reign for your necrotic army to pummel them to death. Now for some Hemomancy spells. Acquired through Sacrosanct's vampiric feeding progression, the spell Profane Sun is my top pick for dealing consistent damage. It does track targets quite slowly however, so it does pair really nicely with the Corpse Curse Paralyze. I was going to feature a bunch of the other damage dealing blood magic spells, but honestly this one is so good that I ended up just always returning to it. There's nothing it doesn't seem to be absolutely shredding. For those longer, more strainful fights, you can cast Borrowed Time on a target. All the health that target then loses within the 20-second window is dealt again at the end of the time limit. Cast this at the start of an engagement with an enemy and see the rewards after the time limit runs out. That's if you don't kill it prior, of course. Because we're using Conjuration, I decided to go with bound weapons for my melee and found this neat variant called Daemon, which is a more physical looking sword that suited the aesthetic that I was going for. And to close the distance, we've got Vampire Vats from the custom skill tree. This might just be my favourite movement skill in the game. And speaking of movement, if you need to travel a larger distance, you could always assume the Mantle of the Vampire Lord and glide using the Wings of the Styx perk acquired in the Vampire Lord skill tree. This can be accessed by pressing tab while transformed. Now for the other side of the coin, truly a vampire's worst nightmare. A fire-wielding Spellblade harnessing the power of Molten Ash with the Volcano spell pack. This is my Red Mountain Ronin. Oh, and a quick disclaimer, this armor is by Fuse on Patreon, the link will be in the description. To mop up stack groups of enemies, we're laying down Molten Carpet with Incendiary Flow, dealing damage over time which goes hand in hand with fire-based destruction perks to juice the damage. As we're up close and personal, Molten Eruption is a fantastic spell, but it does emit a visual effect that might hinder your vision a little bit. I still think it's worth it however. Be sure to max out your fire-based destruction perks such as Conflagration, which ignites the ground dealing damage over time. Add even more dots with a Scorched Earth perk and watch enemies go flying thanks to Cataclysm, which also reduces the poor bugger's magic resistance. Being a Pyromancer, we're going to need to enchant gear for frost and shock resistance, as we won't need to worry about fire, and the higher level enchanting level we have, the better our Spell Scribe perk is going to be, which saves a spell that we're dual casting and then casts it freely when we power attack. My spell of choice for this Spell Scribe build was Molten Palm, dealing 120 fire damage and reducing attack speed of enemies for 3 seconds within melee range. With everything else running on the build, we just cook this ancient vampire's health faster than you can say extra crispy please chef. Not to mention this is on legendary difficulty. Now to recover health instead of potions or restoration, we're using a power called Molten Heart, which heals up to 50% of our health at the cost of Magicka. For our main combo with one-handed katanas, we're using the neutral stance and holding the left click to execute a power attack flourish. The dedicated power attack button does something different, so keep that in mind. The Molten Aura spell is also another great source of fire damage over time, as we're close to enemies during melee. I love the idea of bringing the Red Mountain's wrath to Skyrim as a Dwemer channeling its power, burning everything to ash. We could even double down on fire magic using the Pyromancer custom skill tree, which you can access here through the custom skills menu. It's the third tab along here. There's perks that can boost your fire damage at the cost of being weaker to frost and shock, along with a neat unique Flame Lord conjuration spell which can scale with your level. I never really specced into alteration magic during my playthroughs of Skyrim, and I wanted to explore one of the most slept on magic schools, and in doing so formed a playstyle that I could only explain as, well, a Jedi. Technically, it's just an alteration focused Spellblade, but humour me here. You throw some brown robes on, you conjure yourself a glowing blue sword, and you start pulling enemies around with your magical abilities, and you can start to see where I'm coming from, right? So I stuck with the theme and went alteration with a sprinkle of destruction magic, using some wind spells to try and represent the Force. I even experimented with Load Sphere and Telekinesis to hurl a heavy object at enemies. However, as fun as this was playing Rocket League with the enemies, it starts to lose damage as the difficulty and level increase, but let's discuss what I settled on. To get started, let's talk about defense and buffs, which will be activated as you enter combat, thanks to Akato's Recital. Cast it with a spell equipped in your left hand to store up to 3 spells. Casting without anything in your left hand removes the stored spells should you want to change something. I'm using Ebony Flesh for our armor, which can be improved further with alteration perks while wearing clothing. This one isn't essential, but Staves of Ferocity to make our power attacks reduce enemy armor, and magic resistance is really nice and pairs pretty well with the rest of the kit we're using. Mundus Veil is a little hard to come by with 50% magic resistance. There is a more common spell called Resist Elements, should you not want to play through Project AHO. Sotha's Maelstrom will strip magical resistances by 5% per second, up to 100%, which can be handy in prolonged engagements. Whirlwind Cloak can be useful to push enemy attackers away while dealing some damage in the process, and for one of the strongest abilities from the Triumvirate spell pack, Nightblade can blink you to enemies via melee attacks within 50 feet, converting 50% of your mana into bonus damage. Paired with some enchant gear for reduced alteration and destruction cost, the hefty toll of mana isn't an issue in this build, and it's something that I would definitely prioritise. The main left hand spell I'm using is Pull Through Shadows, which can pull enemies towards you and reduce armour. We are using Spellscribe again for this build, which is paired nicely with Tornado from the Elemental Redux spell pack for more knockdown chance and elemental damage. To add note here, in true Jedi style you can reflect projectiles, both arrows and magic, by timing your block well enough, as this example here shows nicely. This build really lets you dominate and control situations, pulling groups of enemies towards you or blinking towards them while their defences are completely destroyed in the process. Another spell that casts for you is the Helos Grimoire, which will hurl spells from the direction that you're facing for 30 seconds. I paired this with Tornado. With all the debuffs stripping magic resistance, it works really nicely. But to top it all off, we could use Conduit to infuse our bound sword with elements to trigger effects such as Storm Lightning. There is also an unarmoured custom skill tree, which is insanely strong, and just a disclaimer, through my testing, these Jedi looking robes that I was wearing doesn't seem to be triggering unarmoured bonuses, so if you're going to use this, just keep in mind that I don't think it's working as intended, even though it's a cloth set. Hopefully this gets patched around in V6 if it's included, but if not, well, you saw how strong the build was even regardless of the unarmoured perks. Another character I've been working on is an orc that's obsessed with Dwemer tech. This is a cheeky look at my Dwemer Artificer. Bridging science with magic, this orc's learnt how to harness the power of electricity. There's new enchant effects thanks to Summon Misenchantments, and I'm using the ethereal staff to summon Dwemer robots. Oh, and to top it all off, there's the Dwemer autocannons from the smithing perk tree. The cannons constantly fire in the direction that you're facing, so you do have to manually aim them. They do a decent amount of damage, but it's the hammer that's doing most of the dirty work here. Crackle is a fantastic starter spell and still holds up later on, and I'm using Streak from Storm Calling Magic as a gap closer. If you've never used the ethereal staff before, it can randomly summon dwarven spheres or spiders. Crackle is fantastic at proccing shock-based destruction perks like Magnetize, and it's really up to you if you want to lean first into the magic side of things with the shock perks, or you want to go first for two-handed, or focus just entirely on your enchanting. I leveled enchanting and smithing first, and then just started going into two-handed and destruction afterward. But it is reliant on you finding the right enchants to disenchant so that you can get your gear online. I wanted to play a pure thief, one that doesn't kill, a ghost in the night, focusing on pickpocketing, lockpicking and sneaking, and while we're at it, talk about some of the features added by the mod Book of Shadows. For added agility, we're using Nolvus's fantasy mode setting, which actually only adds a couple of things, one being magical jumping. This can be configured with the MCM and requires the use of a magical ring. I just spawned mine in with the add item menu. If you added Skyrim souls like I did, pickpocketing can be a little tricky as the menus are unpaused now. If you get caught, well, you'll certainly know about it as the guards start to blow horns to alert everyone around you, including other guards. You can use smokescreen to get some cover, however, and if you're unarmed, you can do non-lethal stealth takedowns to thin the herd before you make your escape. There's perks like Robber's Eye, which highlight big loot item chests that have a cooldown on them appearing, not to mention the lockpicking UI changes depending on the type of lock that you're picking. I didn't think I'd enjoy a non-combat focused character, but after a few days of playing, I'd become a real menace to the merchants and nobility of Riften. I even posed as a bard during the day, giving myself a disguise. By night I'd be climbing on rooftops and searching for my next mark, and messing with the local guard. I chose Nocturnal as my deity and quickly gained favour by pickpocketing these mysterious coin purses from targets marked with this glowing blue icon. The non-lethal takedowns still let you loot the victims. They also have a timer icon to note that the target isn't dead and will awake eventually. You can also craft smoke bombs to compensate for not having smoke screen all the time, as that power is a once per day. Smoke bombs, you just need to craft enough of them and you can use them as you like. They also blind enemies so that you can get non-lethal takedowns, should you still be stealthy. I think that's about it for this video. I really want to show off different features by making unique builds and showing off perks and abilities. I'll be doing a live stream playthrough on a fresh character, with the poll that will be up shortly on YouTube to decide on what type of character I'll be playing. There's a ton of amazing mod lists that I'd like to cover, and I'm excited for Nolvus V6 of course. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you want to see. Thanks to my Patreons, the modders, and of course Vector. That's it for me now. Ciao for now.